Hey everyone, today we're going to be looking at the first of 3 videos that I'm going to produce regarding Renegades and the creator preview. Now, for those of you that are not aware, although I'm sure this kind of spread like wildfire by now, there were a selection of creators that were invited to Bungie in order to kind of not playtest, but preview Renegades and get some capture footage for you guys. And I was very fortunate to be one of those creators, so very grateful to Bungie for this opportunity. And so we're going to be talking about 3 different subjects: weapons, armor, and gameplay. So I've ordered them in order of like what I think is the most important. So the first video is going to be covering the first impressions that I had of the weapons while I was there. Then tomorrow's video is going to be about armor, and the third video is going to be about gameplay. I think the weapons were the most impactful things that I was able to playtest, and so I'm very excited to present to you my findings as well as some, first look gameplay with some of these weapons that you probably haven't seen before. So excited? Let's go ahead and get right into it. Renegades' first impressions of the weapons. So, a little outline of what we're going to be talking about in this video. There's going to be 5 subjects: exotic weapons, the new archetypes that are being introduced in Renegades, which you've no doubt already had a little look at, legendary weapons, perks, and origin traits. Let's begin with exotic weapons. So there's 3 new exotic weapons coming with Renegades. The first one, which I think is the least talked about right now because it hasn't really been shown much in trailers and stuff like that, is Service of Luzaku. This is, I believe, the Season Pass exotic, and this exotic is essentially a high-impact machine gun that has 300 total ammo. So it has less ammo than a typical 360 RPM LMG, that's of the legendary variety, but in exchange it does 33% more damage per bullet versus a 360 RPM. So for a 360 RPM, an example I can give you is like fixed odds from Duality. If you have that machine gun, imagine that, except it has 300 ammo, and it does 33% more damage per shot. So it's as if you had an aggregate charge, enhanced aggregate charge level damage perk on your machine gun. Now, the special thing about this Service of Luzaku machine gun is that it's kind of like a supportive machine gun. It acts as both a support auto and as a machine gun. Now, its ad clear potential is pretty decent. It spawns like these little threadling nests that spew out like threadlings and like these projectiles, like unravel projectiles, I think. When you shoot them. I didn't get to playtest this machine gun too much. I wasn't super interested in it because, I'm more of a boss damage endgame player type of creator. So I didn't really playtest this one too much. You can probably look at other creators' channels for gameplay footage of this machine gun. I mostly was focused on damage testing. But when it comes to damage, obviously, a high impact machine gun with only 300 ammo, no 4 times a charm, only does 33% more than a legendary. Not very good for boss damage, right? Damage profile basically matches a target lock 360 RPM, and it's an exotic, right? So a couple interesting questions I have about this are, it obviously gives the support frame boost to your allies. So you can see here, rapid healing increases weapon damage and spawns threadlings for your allies. So I don't know if it's going to give the exact same support frame boost. Like the UI, when players that I saw were using it, mimicked that of a support frame auto. So I don't know if it gives the exact same support frame auto to your teammates and they get like a 10% boost and you get a 10% boost that stacks with everything. I don't know if that's how this works, but if that's how this works, then, pretty straightforward. It's basically a support auto machine gun. It doesn't use any ammo when you're healing your allies, as you can see in the little description at the bottom there. So it's, it's all right. I think it's just kind of like a cool, like power fantasy exotic. I don't think it's particularly strong for endgame content. But this is just the data that I have on it. If you're curious about the catalyst, I'll throw it up on the screen here. It just enhances like the threadling nests. I think you can like pick them up, something like that. So yeah, just, it's a serviceable exotic service of Luzaku is serviceable. But yeah, I don't know if the support frame boost is exactly 10%. The shame, I guess, with this machine gun is that unlike support frame autos, like the legendaries, the only way to charge this thing's support meter is by doing damage with the machine gun. So from what I've heard from other creators that were at the event, using this machine gun is pretty fluid. Like the experience of using it is like you just heal your teammates and then you just shoot enemies and you heal your teammates, you shoot enemies, so you never really have to reload the gun. And it's pretty fluid and it clears ads fairly well, but that's not anything particularly noteworthy when it comes to endgame content. Okay. Next we have Heirloom. Heirloom is the Chewbacca crossbow, I believe. If you ADS with this thing, you get like little binocular sights. The special thing about this bow, essentially how it works, it's a heat-based bow, which is interesting because you would assume that heat-based weapons are more like rapid-firing weapons, like machine guns, autos, SMG, that sort of thing. But no, this is a heat-based bow, and the way that it works is essentially when you hold ADS with the weapon, it charges up to 3 tiers of energy. So if you look at something like Whirling Ovation also has 3 tiers of power, and the more and more you wait and charge with it, the more and more damage it will do. Now this thing, you don't actually have to hold left click to charge it down. You just hold ADS and it will slowly ramp up through those 3 tiers. But while you're ADSing, it consumes heat. Okay, so it consumes heat, and then firing also consumes a large chunk of heat. So realistically, if this thing starts with empty heat and you start ADSing on a target, so yeah, you're going to be able to get off 2 max charge shots max, no matter how much you really min-max this weapon, unless maybe you use some sort of like set bonus or something like that to maybe reduce the amount of heat that you need to vent or something like that. So yeah, Heirloom, Big Game Hunter, you can see there, increases damage and area of effect for each charge level. Now, the question here is this thing good for damage? Because it has 20 ammo, which is a fairly large amount, right? That's more than even legendary heavy combat bows. So 20 ammo is fairly good, and that means you're having essentially 10 mags, quote-unquote mags of damage. And so the total damage is actually insanely high with this weapon. It is 200,000 total, and this is scaled on my damage spreadsheet, so this includes buffs, debuffs, all that stuff. Just go to the sustain tab right now and check for other weapons that have 200,000 total damage. And you're going to find that there's very few specials that have anywhere near 200,000 total. So yes, it has a lot of total damage. However, its DPS is not that good, right? So the DPS from shot to shot, and this is not accounting for reloading, just shot to shot. So let's say you have a moment in time where you release the first shot from full charging, and then from that moment in time, you start an interval and you end the interval on the next shot after waiting for the charge to happen. So this is within 1 mag. The shot-to-shot DPS, 2.7 seconds. The DPS during that period is only 3.6 thousand, right? So 3.6 thousand, go ahead, look at my sustain tab in my spreadsheet, and you'll see there 3.6k is like pretty decent for a sustained weapon. This is shot-to-shot. This doesn't account for the time that it takes to vent this weapon. And, you know, between mags, let's just call them mags. They're not actually mags, but, you know, between pairs of shots, right? On top of this, requires you to use the catalyst, right? Now the catalyst it's not like it's hard to use the catalyst or anything like that. But the way the catalyst works is I'll show it on screen right now. It scorches on hit, and it's kind of like Burning Ambition basically. And the ignition does scale. It's not a base level ignition, right? That's 600, 700-ish damage. It does way more than that. And I believe even without ashes, I'll have to check this once Renegades actually comes out, but I believe even without ashes, just 2 shots is enough to cause an ignition, which means every mag, quote unquote mag, you will be able to produce an ignition. And the catalyst also gives you 10% extra damage to scorch targets. So obviously it kind of self-synergizes. Your first shot is going to scorch, your second shot will obviously ignite, and then also get the increased damage because the target is already scorched. Now, with all these things combined, what do I actually think of this weapon? It's cool. I can see people using it for roam content. So another thing that we're going to go over when we talk about heat weapons a bit more, blaster frames, whatever you want to call them, is they sort of have like a reconstruction-like effect where they do exhaust heat over time while the weapon is stowed, just very slowly. So I could see people using Heirloom as like a roam exotic, where you just pull it out, you dump maybe 1 or 2 shots into a beefy target, which does a fair amount of total damage, and then you stow the weapon, and then you don't use it for a while, and then you pull it out again, and then maybe it's like half loaded or like half exhausted by that. So that's kind of my vision for Heirloom. I don't think it's really going to be used for boss DPS. I mean, you could, and I'm certainly going to test it for boss DPS, but it doesn't stand out in this DLC as something where I'm immediately attracted to it for boss DPS. But the total damage is obviously an outlier, and certainly something to be, you know, worth noting. Okay, and also it has Unstop, apparently. I just realized that. It has Unstop, it's in the description. That's cool. Another intrinsic exotic. That's kind of nice. Okay, so that is it for Heirloom. Let's go ahead and talk about the Praxic Blade. The Praxic Blade, this is it's a lightsaber. You know, everyone's talking about this thing. Everyone's curious. Is the lightsaber going to be crazy OP for DPS? I can't reveal everything about the Praxic Blade at this moment because there's a lot of customization with this weapon. There's crystals, there's mods, there's cores, there's catalysts, and they're going to be found, you know, while you're playing Renegades from different parts of the DLC, from different parts of the content that you're going to play, but I can't get into too much in terms of what they actually do and how they actually work. Just know that there's a lot of customization. The weapon itself is also very versatile. You can block with it and deflect shots, as you've probably seen. You can throw the lightsaber, and it'll like kind of do a little spin and go through enemies, and then it'll come back to you automatically. And then you can also swing with it as if it's a sword. So I'm going to be talking about the damage profile of this thing because I think that's what most people are interested in. And also, I guess, some stuff for endgame content like movement. So the first thing I'll say is that this thing is not great for skating. I'll show like a clip on the screen right now while I'm talking. You can fake skate with it for those of you who are like more speedrun adjacent, but the animation is kind of awkward. The way I like to put it to people who can't see, visually what I mean is if you know what a sword left click looks like on the ground, like a light attack looks like on the ground, it's like an kind of awkward animation compared to when you're left clicking in the air, right? The Praxic Blade, when you left click in the air, it kind of looks like you're left clicking on the ground. And so the animation is a bit drawn out and a bit awkward to swap with. If you try to fake skate with it, it doesn't let you swap immediately. So you can get some momentum out of it, but it's not great. And then in terms of right click lining, no. And then in terms of ground lining, it's like similar speed, I think, to a regular legendary sword's left click. So don't expect any crazy skating stuff out of this. There might be some customization in the future that might play into the Praxic Blade and skating and stuff like that, but it's don't expect anything crazy is what I'm gonna say when it comes to movement, at least. Okay. Now let's talk about damage, because damage profile is going to be a big thing with this, because everybody is asking, is the lightsaber going to be good for DPS? So I'm gonna give you some numbers here. First, this thing does 420 damage with its light attack. It does 803 damage with its regular heavy attack, and this is with 100 weapons and with the new gear or featured gear bonus excluded at +0 raid dungeon level. Anytime I give you damage numbers, I'm going to be referencing that. So yeah, 420 light, 803 regular heavy, has 63 ammo, right, when it's configured for damage, and it has a special combo. So most swords, the heavy attack just is the heavy attack no matter what you do. This lightsaber, if you do 3 light attacks and then a heavy attack afterward, it does a special heavy that does like a multi-damage tick heavy. So the heavy, instead of becoming an 803 single number, it becomes a 605 number plus 4 366 numbers. And the amount of time that it takes to do 1 3 light 1 heavy cycle is 3.1 seconds. So all of this combined, along with some damage configurations, if you configure the Praxic Blade for maximum damage, for boss damage, it does around 3000 DPS sustained, and which is, if you look at current swords that are in my boss damage spreadsheet, a lot of them are like 3.5, even approaching 4K in some cases. So yeah, it's not amazing when it comes to boss DPS. I will say though, it does have pretty crazy total damage. It has like a relentless-like effect, and it has some insane total damage. So I don't know, if you want to wail away at a boss with this thing, I mean, you can. It has like really, really high total damage. I remember I have a clip of me just like swinging away on an enemy and just getting back ammo. Like I was losing like 1 ammo per combo or something like that. I don't recall if it was maybe because of an artifact mod, but I'm pretty sure like it has a lot of total damage. That's my point. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say. The customizations, obviously you've seen that there's different colors. That's going to be the crystals, mods, core, catalyst. That's going to, affect your playstyle and stuff like that. So lots of customization available. I can't get too much into it, but yeah, that's the Praxic Blade. Certainly my overall opinion of this weapon, knowing what I know, is I think it's going to be a versatile weapon. I think people are going to enjoy using it in the context of this DLC. And it has some potential for some unique utility purposes for sure. And we'll definitely have to see how players end up using this thing once they have it in their hands, because again, a lot of customization. That's kind of the name of the game with this thing. Okay, so that is the Praxic Blade. Let's go ahead and start talking about legendary weapons. So the first thing I want to get out of the way before we start talking about weapon archetypes and stuff like that is blaster frames. Okay. This is a big change, and I'm not sure if other creators are really going to cover this, because I don't know how much they've tested stuff like base value wise, but blasters are very OP. They're very OP. I had a sit down with a dev, I think over lunch or something like that, and we were discussing blasters, and I brought up a concern that, number one, blasters, the idea that a bunch of these weapons in the archetype area, like the intrinsic trait area, they're now all called balanced heat or dynamic heat weapon, is probably going to be confusing to new players, because the labeling is the same across different weapon types, when before you would have lightweight frame and it's like, oh, it's a lightweight frame SMG, it's going to do this much damage and it's going to have this RPM. Now you can have different RPMs and different damage profiles under the same weapon family, and they can have the same archetype. So the only way to know really what sort of damage profile you should be expecting is by looking at the RPM and maybe the impact value if you're looking at stuff like adaptive versus lightweight SMG. So this is definitely like, I don't know, it's a cool change, don't get me wrong, like it's cool, but like it might be a bit confusing for people because now there's an extra layer, right? Because like in D2, when you look at a weapon, you have the tier, you have the perks, you have the origin trait, you have the masterwork, you have the weapon mod, you have the affinity, and you have the archetype, right? You have the archetype, but now you're also going to have this extra thing. Is it a blaster or not, right? And so yeah, let's go ahead and talk about blasters for a little bit, and I'll explain exactly what they are and how they work. I'm sure you guys already know. Third iteration is sort of like a prototype for this blaster system where it vents over time while it's stowed, but you can manually vent it to reload it a lot faster. And when you vent it, it obviously scales with typical reload buffs. And typically, I will say typically because I think some weapons, they were kind of similar, but when you take a one-for-one comparison between a heat weapon versus a non-heat weapon, a blaster versus a non-blaster, you're able to fire for longer, so the mag size on average is larger, right? So the firing duration, the effective mag size is larger. And of course, blasters can also partial reload. So what I mean by this is obviously if you're halfway through exhausting your weapon or venting your weapon, you can just start shooting halfway through, and you'll obviously won't be able to shoot as long as if you vented it completely, but you can start shooting. It's a partial reload. There's also a lot of heat-related stuff that's coming up, whether it's set bonuses, origin traits, stuff like that, that will synergize with this new heat system and will not interact with the rest of the sandbox for non-heat weapons. So that's another thing to look out for. Stowed exhaust we already talked about. And the big thing with blasters though is like so far all of this is kind of like, okay, it's cool, that's nice, there's a little bit of diversity in the sandbox. You know, some people are going to prefer blaster stuff, some people are not going to prefer blaster stuff. And obviously whenever Bungie introduces a new system to the game, they add synergies, right? Whether it's in the artifact, origin traits, you know, set bonuses, stuff like that. They want you to play with these new systems, and so they'll encourage you, you know, to do so by integrating some sort of new synergies or artifact mods, right? The problem is blasters inherently do more damage to powerful combatants. Both of the archetypes, dynamic and balanced, both do more damage to powerful combatants, bosses, bosses. And the dynamic heat weapons actually just have higher base damage than their non-blaster counterparts. So, I mean, I thought I'd seen it all when it comes to archetype power creep in the past, but this is kind of like a whole new level because as far as I can see, I don't think there's really a lot of downsides to using blaster weapons and like venting and stuff like that because you have reload perks, you know. I've confirmed personally that stuff like Peacekeepers and Loaders stuff, you know, it exhausts your weapon fully. So they're effectively like a regular weapon, except they have a longer duration for firing. They do more damage. And I mean, I guess venting maybe has like a higher reload floor, I guess. Like if you reduce your reload time as much as possible, maybe like a regular mag weapon will reload faster than like a vented weapon. But I don't think that difference really matters that much in endgame content. And the values that I'm going to talk to you about, which you can see on your screen right now, they're not insignificant. These are really big numbers, right? Like 15% more damage to bosses if you have a balanced archetype. It's like 15 to 17%. I had some number variance between different archetypes, but again, I've tested a lot of weapons, as you can see: SMG, Auto, Pulse, Scout, Pulse, Sidearm, Hankin. I tested 7 different examples, and it's around the same numbers. It's like 15, 17%, just more damage to bosses, right? And then the dynamic, the higher base damage, by the way, and the increased damage to bosses both stack. So a dynamic Pulse, a dynamic Sidearm, a dynamic Hand Cannon, they do 30% to 32% more damage to bosses for nothing. So this obviously has kind of vast implications for sandbox like balance, because there's a lot of new weapons, which we're going to talk about in the rest of this presentation, that are not blasters. And you're going to look at it as a player with this data in your mind and be like, well, yeah, that's a nice roll, but it's not a blaster. And that means I'm going to be sacrificing 15 to 30% of my potential damage to bosses. And for dynamic weapons, I think it's just damage in general, because it's not a blaster. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm like the biggest fan of this system. I mean, obviously every season Bungie adds like newer and more powerful stuff to the game, like the weapons. I mean, typically what it's been is originally we had new perks, and weapons would have new perks added to them, and the new perks would be better than the old perks, and the new perk combos would be better than the old perk combos, and people would take the new weapons because of that. Then it became, there's new archetypes, right? So for example, like heavy burst pulses, power crept old pulses because they just did more damage, etc., etc. And then it became, there's like special versions of primary archetypes. So you have rocket sidearms, you have rocket pulses, blah, blah, blah. And now we have blasters. And blasters are just a better version of normal archetypes. They're just a better version. So I'm kind of like iffy on like this system, because now whenever Bungie releases something, there's always the question of, oh, it's not a dynamic, it could be better. Or, oh, it's just not a blaster, so it's just going to be losing me damage against a blaster version of this weapon. And so, I don't know, this is like a really big jump as well, because in prior seasons, you would have competitors, right? You would have, it was just like the weapons were the same, but the perks were different. Now it's like the perks are different and the weapon is fundamentally different as well. So I'm not sure how this is going to play out. But yeah, this is like a new version of power creep. Also, in my opinion, if Bungie is going to continue making aggressive advances like this in terms of introducing new weapon systems that are just inherently more powerful than the, existing weapon systems, we should just do away with the featured and new gear stuff in terms of like damage bonus and DR bonus, because people are going to use the new stuff anyway. It is just better, right? Like we are reducing the new gear bonus from 10 to 5%, but our new gear that is coming out in Renegades, like a lot of these blaster weapons are blasters, right? They're just going to do 15, 30%. So what is 10%? That's a spit in the face of a 30%. I don't know. I think this is one of the biggest changes in Renegades, which will probably fly under the radar, because I didn't really hear people talking about it when I was, at Bungie and talking. Like, this is a big change, right? Like, imagine like you get a god roll sniper and it's just not a blaster. It's not a dynamic sniper. So it's just, okay, to be fair, I don't know what the differences are when it comes to heavies and specials. Maybe they're reduced. That would be a good decision from them. But as far as I can see, that's a big change, That's a big change. So yeah, I don't know. That's all I have to say about blasters, really. I think the featured gear and the new gear system, they can stay when it comes to like avant-garde stuff and encouraging people, or even like forcing people to interact with new gear to play specific things as an added challenge, I suppose. But like the damage bonus just doesn't make sense anymore, like with stuff like this being added to the game. Whatever, that's cool. I mean, blasters, I will say though, I mean, they feel cool. They're cool. I like the system, but the damage stuff, I don't know. I'll leave that for you guys to decide. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about our first new archetype, like actual archetype, the 72 RPM disruption sniper. So I noticed some people who were just like making things up, who were saying that the RPM of this refurbished A499 was going to be so slow that box breathing would be the best perk on this weapon. I'm not going to lie, guys. This past DLC news discourse cycle has really taught me that people on Destiny Twitter and Destiny Reddit will literally just like make things up. They will just make things up. They'll just make things up for no reason. And they will just like sound extremely confident while doing it. I have had the privilege, obviously, of having access to information ahead of time and just like comparing the information that I have and I know to be true compared to the stuff that I'm seeing people say very confidently has been kind of an eye-opener. So yeah, just don't believe everything you see online prior to a release cycle, no matter what people are really saying. I've seen people that are very confident about just things that are completely wrong. Even based on some things that they've read in twids and stuff, they just extrapolate and it just ends up being completely wrong. So this is one of those things. It's not 40 RPM or whatever people were saying. It is a 72 RPM sniper. And even if it was a 40 RPM sniper, by the way, this thing is a single mag. It's a single shot magazine, which means even if you wanted to use box breathing to match the RPM or whatever, you have to reload the gun every time you shoot. And when you're reloading, that doesn't count as ADSing for box breathing. So you see the problem here. So yeah, it's a 72 RPM weapon. I think this weapon is low-key going to be quite good for damage. So right off the rip, let's go ahead and take a look at its damage profile. Look at the right side of your screen. We got 2362 damage per shot, single shot mag like I mentioned. And you might notice 2362, that's a lot of damage. That's base damage per shot, right? Rockets, for reference. A rocket, an aggressive rocket or an adaptive rocket, take your pick, with Pack Hunter and Impact Casing together does less damage than a single shot of this sniper, by the way. So I want you to let that sink in, right? Like that's, yeah. And rockets, you know how many rockets you have? You got 9, you got 10, you got 8. That's how many rockets you get. This thing has 20 shots and doesn't require Pack Hunter. And it works with Darcy. So when I say 2362, by the way, that's not including Darcy. No Sniper's Meditate, just base damage. No Darcy, no nothing. 2362 per shot. Okay. Now, these numbers are not necessarily, these numbers are not necessarily the final. The build I was playing was obviously not the retail build. And maybe I made a mistake on my numbers. I double check them, but maybe I made a mistake on my numbers. But still, regardless, right? 2362 per shot. That's a lot. Okay. It's 12% more per shot compared to rockets, which have Pack Hunter and Impact Casing, blah, 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 aggressive frame. And it has basically the same total damage as New Land Beyond. And if you've heard me talk about New Land Beyond before, New Land Beyond does a lot of total damage, like a lot of total damage, right? Except this thing does 2 times damage per shot, approximately, compared to New Land Beyond. And this is New Land Beyond with like a fair amount of stacks, like an average amount of stacks. So yeah, you know, it's gonna be good. I don't know what to tell you. It's gonna be good. In terms of perk pool, we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I know everybody was talking about box breathing, and they're like, you know, it has to be good with box breathing because they literally explicitly mentioned that on heavy snipers, it's gonna be 30%. This thing is aggregate charge. So I hate to burst your bubble, but you're gonna be using aggregate charge. So yeah, that is my opinions on the refurbished A499. The perk pool, we'll talk about it again when we get to the list of weapons. I have a whole list of weapons that I'm allowed to talk about, which I'll show on the screen when we get there. And we'll talk about the perk pool more when we get there. But that is all I want to say about the A499. It is potentially very, very good for boss damage. So, yippers, let's move on. Okay. Uncivil Discourse. This is a 180 RPM dynamic special hand cannon. And this is one of the examples of like weapons where I'm like, this is why it would be confusing to a new player, right? Because this is a 180 RPM hand cannon, just like the other precision hand cannons we have in the game. But instead of being named a precision weapon, it's a dynamic heat weapon. And by the way, there is a dynamic heat, or I'm pretty sure it's a dynamic heat. Is it? Yeah. There's a dynamic heat 180 RPM primary hand cannon. So it's super confusing because you have these two things that they have the same frame name, but they're different ammo types, but they have the same RPM. So it's like, I don't know. It's a little, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I think the system is like definitely a little confusing. I think it would be nice if they had like a separate section for like blaster stuff and it wasn't just replacing the intrinsic trait stuff. But, I guess it kind of makes sense because, the intrinsic trait stuff is not supposed to just represent the RPM, but it's also supposed to represent like an intrinsic effect, like rapid fires when they're completely empty, they reload faster, stuff like that. And you don't want to have both of those effects stacked on a weapon, but still, I don't know, it's just weird. I guess that was a compromise they had to make. Okay, let's actually just, no more yapping, let's talk about Uncivil Discourse. So, this thing, for reference, if you want to look at my spreadsheet, I'm going to try to avoid giving too many exact numbers because it kind of flies over people's heads, and it's like, then you have to do the work yourself, right? So I'm just going to give you like conclusions, which is usually what people come to me for. So, Uncivil Discourse does around 3.4 times damage per shot compared to current 180 RPM hand cannons. So, if you want to take a look at what this weapon will theoretically do when it comes to Lucky Pants, go to my swap tab right now on my DPS spreadsheet, and you can clone it, whatever, and duplicate I think it's the Sightline Survey Enhanced Precision Instrument row, and add a 3.4 times multiplier to the swap DPS. What are you going to get? 8.8 thousand swap DPS from a single mag of this thing. So needless to say, Uncivil Discourse, by the way, I tested this, the Lucky Pants scaling is the same as a primary hand cannon. So I was thinking, okay, well, I mean, if this weapon does literally 3.4 times what current 180 RPMs do, then obviously they're going to nerf its interaction with Lucky Pants like they do with Ariana and Sturm and like all that stuff, right? They're obviously going to nerf it. No, they didn't. It's 5.5 times or whatever it is. So it's the same scaling as the normal Lucky Pants. The only downside to this thing really is that it has 44 shots, and against a current like 180 RPM hand cannon, you need 17 shots to max out, fully saturate that Lucky Pants duration, that timer. And 17 shots when you have 44 total, it's like 2.6 mags. So it's not a lot, but the burst is pretty crazy, right? So like 8.8 thousand is a lot. That's like super like level of DPS, by the way. So yeah, Lucky Pants are back like in an actual way. I think this is the first time ever that Lucky Pants are like a legitimately insanely powerful damage option. Like before, it was like, oh, you could swap to Malfeasance for Final Stand. Oh, we could do Warden's Law stuff. Like it was like quirky, not quirky necessarily. Like it did have some actual use, but this is like legitimately a class leading option, right? Like when people talk about still hunt on hunters, and I'm sure there's going to be discourse. Like I'm making this video well in advance, by the way. So I'm sure there's going to be discourse regarding hunter damage and warlock damage. Like this is like a big, like, this is a lot. This is a lot. So yeah, but bear in mind though, like this thing just at a base level, like without Lucky Pants and stuff, abysmal total versus other special weapons when it comes to bosses at least. I don't know if it has like enhanced minor scalers or something, but like when it comes to boss damage at least, this thing has abysmal total. Without the Lucky Pants stuff. So this is basically, in my opinion, some people might use it for PvP. I know people were using it in PvP when we were playing private matches at Bungie, because it's like a legendary forerunner kind of in a way. But in terms of like, PvE stuff, I don't know. I mean, I think people will have to like play with it to find out whether they like it or not for PvE. I don't think it's going to be better than like, I don't know, like Area Denial, Rocket Pulse, or Rocket Saturn, maybe that sort of thing. I mean, it definitely competes directly with Rocket Saturns, but it requires precision, blah, 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 stuff like that. So, that's kind of, I'll let the jury decide that one. But when it comes to damage, abysmal total, but crazy burst. It's like crazy burst, like crazy burst. So you could definitely see people in solo challenges, low man challenges, or even on day one stuff next season, you might see people like pop on Celestial Stillhunt, go Stillhunt Goldie, and then swap to Lucky Pants, and then just dump a mag on this thing. That's how good it is. So I don't know. I could be wrong on the numbers here. Again, like not the retail build. Changes might happen, stuff like that. But at least when I was testing, this thing easily blew Ariana's Vow swap stuff out of the water. Like it's not even close. So yeah, that is that. And it's like 55k damage per mag, by the way, which is like the equivalent of like, I don't know, like 2 Thunder Crash, like a little under 2 Thunder Crashes, which is like for a mag of hand cannon, that's pretty good. Okay, anyways, let's move on. Okay, next we have Peculiar Charm. This is the most uninteresting of the new archetypes. This is an aggressive burst, 600 RPM SMG, and it does similar damage to current 600 RPM SMGs. I think it does maybe a little bit less or a little bit more, but the difference is very negligible. So it's probably not relevant for PvE because 600 RPM SMGs are already pretty bad. And, you know, being a 4 burst might make it more awkward or less awkward. I'm not sure. This is definitely like more of a PvP weapon. I think this is, it's a Crucible drop. So seems like a PvP archetype to me. Oh, it's a comp weapon, isn't it? Yeah, it's got the grips. So yeah, probably comp weapon. And I think I heard the PvP guys saying that it was nice, but they weren't like raving about it like crazy. So I don't expect it to be amazing. Certainly not for PvE though. Okay. So that is that. Has a big mag. Has a big mag though. I guess I'll say that much. As you can see. Okay. Next up, we have a full list of every weapon that I'm allowed to talk about. There are more weapons that are going to be in Renegades. Renegades is bringing a lot of new weapons. Thankfully, I don't think if you're an endgame player at least, you don't really need to farm for that much. I think the red rows are going to be the stuff that I'm most excited to talk about, which we've already covered most of it. But yeah, there are more weapons that are coming that are not shown on this screen. But I'm just like, you know, I can't talk about them yet. But, you know, be excited. There's going to be more weapons as well. So out of these weapons, what do we got? So let's take a look. I've italicized and bolded anything that has the word dynamic, because dynamic weapons are OP. And if we look at the red rows here, I mean, really, it's going to be 3 things, right? Number 1, Uncivil Discourse. Damage perk wise, this thing has access to Precision Instrument. That's the best damage perk you're going to get on it. And yeah, as I said, Lucky Pants, crazy. On other classes, if you're playing Warlock Titan, a toss up on whether it's worth it or not. Up to you. Refurbished A499, again, has aggregate charge. The only thing unfortunate about this new Disruption Sniper is that the first slot has some doggy doo-doo. Okay? If they give this weapon a weapon with this archetype, Slideways, Slide Shot, Envious Arsenal, anything like that, I think the swap DPS stocks of this weapon are going to skyrocket, right? They're going to be amazing. However, right now, it has essentially no good perks in the first column. Like, I rolled through the perks on A499, and the best I could come up with was like Snap Aggregate, which is like Snapshot, really? Like when I'm telling you that Snapshot is the best perk in the column, you know, it's not great. So yeah, yeah, great weapon for swap DPS. Has a lot of room to grow, has a lot of potential. So that's interesting. And also, like I mentioned, works with Darcy. Okay, Psi Eterna 4. As the article implied with Rocket Pulses, that in the weapons tuning article, when they were nerfing the reserves of Mint and you know, Rocket Pulses, they mentioned other Rocket Pulses in the future, right? This is what they were talking about. There is an Energy Arc Rocket Pulse. And when I looked at the perks, I didn't see anything too crazy, right? It's kind of, it didn't have like Mint level perks. Like it didn't have, I don't even know if it has Rewind. I don't know if it has Bait or Honing either. It just had like pretty standard, like Ad Clear-ish perks. So again, I didn't shuffle through the whole perk pool, so I'm not 100% confident, but just at base glance, it did not look like it had perks that were as good as Mint. So just be aware of that. It is an Energy Rocket Pulse though, so like I'm sure people are still going to farm for it, and that's why I put it here. Other stuff, I mean, I don't know, like maybe the aggressive fusion, you know, high impact fusion could be interesting. With the fusion buffs, we'll have to see. We'll have to do some testing and stuff like that. And you'll see, I mean, if you're curious about any of the weapons here, any of the potentially noteworthy ones, I put some notes here. Some of the other weapons I didn't really get to look at too much, but you know, just at face value, like the 3 weapons that I've highlighted are easily the most important ones. There is a dynamic sniper, which I didn't get the chance to test, so I don't know if specials again have the same like 32% increase to boss damage compared to normal snipers, but I wrote not kinetic, but it will probably be best in slot because it is a dynamic weapon, so it gets like a free 30% damage. Presumably 30%. I didn't test specials, but presumably 30% against bosses. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this page. I guess I will... Oh yeah, there's a Void crossbow. It didn't look like it had good perks at all compared to Submersion and Opaque. And what else is there? There is a... Oh, Cataphract GL3. Yeah, that's an adaptive. they're reprising that one. Yeah, disappointing perks. Best is Envious Bait. Nothing special, nothing crazy. So yeah, that's it for legendary weapons. You can take a screenshot of this page if you want, and you know, keep it somewhere, you know, under your pillow. Look at the weapons, but yeah, not too crazy. Okay, let's move on and talk about perks. So perks, I'm not gonna lie, the perks were not that interesting. Of the ones that I saw, there might be more, but these were all the ones that I could kind of get my hands on and see. Thermal atomization, this one is like high impact reserves, but for heat weapons. So it does increasing amounts of damage. I think like right when you're about to like run out of ammo, like when you're about to overheat or whatever, it like hits 15%. So unless this is like a first column perk, not the best, right? Not the best. Delicate tuning is like PvP stats related stuff to heat, so not going to talk about that one too much. Trickle charge, I've highlighted in red here because I think it's like maybe the only notable perk. Reload on bolt charge, that was the description. I didn't check whether it was like on your first get of bolt charge, it reloads, and then like after that, if you're behind a Stormscape barricade and it stacks to ×2, ×3, ×4, it doesn't reproc. Like I don't know if it does that or not. I wasn't able to test it. I also don't know if it has an internal cooldown on the effect. If it works with Storm's Keep and it like continuously reloads your weapon and you don't have to like worry about an internal cooldown, this perk is essentially the return of old Lunas, which is cool, I guess. That's nice. I mean, yeah, that's nice, I suppose. But I don't know. I haven't tested it yet. And the weapons that it does appear on right now, as far as I know, they're not that impressive. So we'll see. Maybe it's going to be on a, who knows? Maybe they'll put it on an arc disruption sniper. That would be good, right? Okay, cooling baubles. You lose some heat on orb pickup or elemental pickup. Could be useful for like a heat weapon where you're doing DPS with like attrition orbs or something. I don't know. Situational, not amazing. Mega Neura is making a return on oxygen, as you saw on the previous slide. So yeah, I mean, it's the same. I don't think they changed it. So Mega Neura. Adhesive Ordnance, exhaust explosion on the first shot after ammo pickup. Yeah, I didn't test a lot of these perks because I was doing other stuff when I was there. But I don't like, even just the perk itself, even if the explosion is quite large, does not seem very good. It's like a, I don't know, like a box breathing shattering blade type of thing where it's like only on your first shot. And those perks are traditionally pretty bad in endgame PvE, so I'm not going to expect anything out of this one. Butterfly, when you ADS for a while, your next kill will explode, I think, is how that perk works. Again, not amazing, like a Firefly Dragonfly offshoot, but requires you to ADS for a long time, which is like, who wants to do that in endgame PvE? And then stopping power, kinetic ammo now staggers and deals additional damage to low health targets. Yeah, I didn't really get to test this one, but it, again, on paper, does not seem very good. And then finally, All-Star, 50% damage for 10 seconds on heavy pickup. Given that it requires you to pick up a heavy brick and that it only lasts 10 seconds, 15% is chump change when it comes to, you know, when it comes to being a damage buff. So not amazing. I think Trickle Charge is like the most interesting perk. There might be a perk here that I missed. I think there was maybe like 1 or 2 perks maybe that I missed, but I'm pretty sure I covered all of them. Yeah, lower timer for special, by the way, on All-Star, if you're considering spamming special finishers as like a strategy. Yeah, it's just the same damage bonus, I'm pretty sure, but like lower timer than 10 seconds, maybe 5. Yeah, pretty bad perk, honestly. I was kind of surprised. Most of these perks are like not very good, but that's fine. You know, obviously we have very, very strong weapons. Okay, finally, last thing we're going to talk about in this video. God knows how long I've been talking. Okay, origin traits. There's 3 new origin traits. The first one is called Air Cooled Core. This one is on the seasonal weapons. It is sprint to vent, is the main effect when it comes to PvE. There's other like PvP related effects, but the main thing that you're going to be looking at is when you sprint, it vents your weapons faster. And so that makes sense, obviously, because all of the seasonal weapons are heat-based weapons. And I don't know if this works when the weapon is stowed. If the weapon is stowed and it, you know, sprinting, you know, vents it faster, that would be cool. But the other effects are not really super noteworthy. So that's Air Cooled Core. Imperial Allegiance. This is actually a pretty important one, right? This is from the dungeon weapons, so from Equilibrium. Cooling and charge rate boost for being, I think it's just passive. I don't even think you need to be near allies. So cooling and charge rate boost, and then you also get a damage boost at high heat near allies. So this is kind of like the thermal atomization perk where at high heat, aka like at the bottom of your mag, you get increased damage, which is nice. It's kind of like the, I don't know, like the prophecy origin trait in some ways. So yeah, I'm curious to see how much damage it is, but it's free damage, right? It's free damage. You just gotta be near allies. Like, I think it stacks as well, actually. So maybe if you're near 5 allies in a raid or something, you know, maybe there's a lot. Who knows? But we'll see. Nail Meat Hammer. This one is on an unknown set of weapons. I don't know. I didn't really get the chance to explore this origin trait too much, but I believe what it said is it increases the ammo generation of your weapons and increases the shield break power of your weapons. Like when you're breaking a shield, it's like easier to break a shield or something like that. So yeah, that is pretty much it. So that's it for weapons. I'm sure this has been quite eye-opening. The blaster stuff was certainly a lot, right? So to summarize, just because I'm sure I've been talking for a long time now, let me briefly go over what was in this video. So I think the 3 new exotics, none of them are crazy like OP or like very strong for endgame content. I think Heirloom is like cool for total damage, but people will need to experiment with that. Praxic Blade, maybe with like some artifact stuff, like it could be, you know, decent for DPS, but it's not a class leader at the current moment when it comes to DPS. And then legendary weapons, 2 big things. The blasters are crazy, right? The blasters are insane. 15 to 30% extra damage to bosses for free for doing nothing. And then your disruption sniper, potential swap DPS option, room to grow in the future when it comes to perk pool, stuff like that. The dynamic special hand cannon, the 180 RPM. On Civil Discourse, that thing is crazy OP with Lucky Pants, so could be very, very good. And yeah, there's energy rocket pulse, new perks are in, you know, origin traits are you know, decent. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. I've overwhelmed you with a lot of information, so we'll see you tomorrow. These are the biggest changes though, like the armor changes, they're cool, and there's definitely some interesting stuff in there, but nowhere near as impactful as the weapon stuff. So hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll sprinkle some footage here and there to keep you entertained. And yeah, have a good one.